Appreciate it. Thank you all for coming to hear how Mind Eye's role in stroke rehabilitation is linked in with the other people on a team. What we're going to be discussing tonight is the overview of visual processing, the effects of visual processing from strokes, and then how Mind Eye would fit in with a team of practitioners. And then we have it open for questions. So we have a lot to cover, and it's already a few minutes into the webinar. So let's get started. If we start with the first topic, just to get a sense of visual processing and what it is, because it's not just seeing. You have three parts. One part is seeing an object on the outside of you. It's in front of you, you're seeing it. That's the outside. But then once you see it, you think about it and you can visualize it, you can change it. You could say, what could I do with this? More creativity. That's on the inside of your head. But that's a visual skill, and it's internal. It's not eyesight. So the children use that in school to take notes. Somebody says something and you hear it. So the input goes in through your ears, but then you're visualizing it and conjuring up images. So that visual imagery is a visual system, but it's on the inside. And then there's a whole other thing that some of you may not know about, which would be non-image forming signaling. So it's signaling that's linked with eyes, but it doesn't have to do with eyesight. So an example of that would be sleep centers in your brain and jet lag. People are familiar with jet lag when you fly to another place and the time is off and the lighting is different. That's a non-image signaling. It's not an eyesight pathway, but it links with eyes. So now we'll take each one of these separately. So from the outside, when you see an object, there's your central eyesight, which is your 20/20 type eyesight. And it's what you're paying attention to. And it would be your straight ahead eyesight. It's really slow because it only happens after you decide to aim at an object and focus your attention on that object. Then there's another eyesight, which is your peripheral eyesight. And that is anything you're not paying attention to. So some people think peripheral eyesight's just on the sides, way on the sides, and that is peripheral eyesight. But peripheral eyesight is also whatever you're not looking directly at. So if you're reading something and you're looking at a word on the page, your peripheral eyesight is seeing the rest of the paragraph. So the peripheral eyesight could be right in front of you, just not what you're directly aiming your attention on. So there's an awareness with your peripheral eyesight and attention with your central eyesight. And there's a relationship between the attention and awareness that goes on all the time. So the peripheral eyesight is used a lot more. So driving, you use your peripheral eyesight almost exclusively until you're reading a street sign or a license plate. But the peripheral eyesight is used even when you're reading text. You do a lot of skimming, that's all your peripheral eyesight. You'll use your central to zoom in on one particular word, or if you're doing math problems, a particular number. Those two systems, the central eyesight system and the peripheral eyesight system, are nicknamed the what is it and where is it pathways, because the central eyesight identifies something and tells what it is, and the peripheral eyesight determines where it is. Now, from the inside of your head and how you're thinking about the object, there's a lot of different visual perceptual skills. So we test 7 of them with a standardized test. The 7 we test would include pulling a figure out of a background. So if you have a lot of clutter and you're having to find something, you need to scan and then zoom in on one particular target and ignore the rest. That's called figure ground. There's glimpsing something with the corner of your eye and just looking at it and remembering what it is. So there's visual memory. There is visual closure, which is seeing a lot of details and trying to figure out what the main concept is. There's discrimination of being able to see tiny little differences between images. So the word form and the word farm are almost the same, except the word farm has a little tail drawn on the A. So that little tiny tail changes the meaning of the word. So, or many different examples like that. So there's several different perceptual skills that you could have. There's also form constancy, where if you have a target that's up and down like this, and on an angle and on another angle, some people just see that as a straight line because they're using their central identification system and saying, that's a line, this is a line, this is a line. They're not different. You know, you have an X, here's a plus sign, here's an X. They're the same because it's two lines that cross. That's form constancy. And then you have the spatial representation, spatial relationships, and whether something's closer or farther to you, bigger or smaller. So a lot of different skills. Then you have visualization of the object, and you link memories that are related to it. And what's interesting is each time you see something or hear something, this happens with auditory also, there's an emotion attached to the memory. So I was in a group with many people of different ages, and music played. And one person was funny, they remembered ice skating to that as a teenager. Somebody else said, no, that's the song that they played at my wedding. And someone else said, no, this is the song we went into a disco and danced to. So the memories that you have link with whatever incoming input is happening. So when you're visualizing and you add an emotion to it, what you visualize might be very different than what somebody else visualizes. In my groups, I'll often ask people to visualize a dog, and you'll get some people visualizing giant German shepherds, and other people visualizing tiny chihuahuas, and other people visualizing just a face of a dog, and other people visualizing a dog running around the beach. And some people will have a dog in a house. So your mental imagery is determined by who you are as a person and your experiences. And the same thing happens when you have a stroke, that depending on who you are as a person determines how you come back, how quickly. So that's the internal system. So we've covered external eyesight systems and internal processing systems. But now you have these non-image forming pathways, and these are samples of them. Now, how am I? How much energy do I have? Because that's going to determine how much effort I put into watching a target. If I don't feel good and I'm exhausted and I have a cold, I am going to choose not to pay attention to a word on a page that I don't care about. Then you have an am I safe decision. You know, what's happening in my surroundings? Do I have to put some of my attention on my surroundings? Am I afraid I'm going to fall when I'm walking? So I'm going to put some of my thinking toward making sure I don't fall. Do I care about what I want to look at? You know, is it something I have to look at, or is it something I want to look at? Again, those emotions go in place because it determines your motivation. If you have a low amount of energy, but a high amount of motivation, you might choose to aim your eyes and focus in on a target. If you don't care about the target and you don't have a lot of energy, then unless you're forced to, then you might not bother expending the energy. And then you have this, am I balanced? There's a lot of posture components that are linked with eye issues. So these are some of the non-image forming pathways. So to put it a different way, there's these non-image forming interactions, and there's this image forming interactions. And this picture was drawn by my aunt in 1996. So it's actually 27 years ago now. And at that time, the neuroscience research was showing this, but we weren't using eyeglasses to affect those non-image forming signaling pathways. So it's 27 years later, almost 3 decades. And now the neuroscience is using things to, it's second nature now to start saying, hey, patients have these problems. There's linkages between various brain pathways that need help. A different way to look at it is this way. As I just said, you have non-image forming signals. There's about 200,000 of them. And then you have image forming signals. There's about 1 million of them. This is your eyesight. That's your not eyesight. But these are all of the how am I safe, where am I? And then there's this space and time with an object. So the object, where and when is it, versus who am I as a person? Am I motivated or not? And do I care? And then identifying on the outside what the object is, and then visualizing on the inside. So it's a lot of different signaling pathways. So when you start thinking of eye exams to just be seeing, can you see? That's not enough in a stroke patient, because the can you see is this, what is it? And as I said earlier, it's the slowest pathway because it doesn't happen until all the other pathways are in place. So the internal system doesn't always represent what's on the outside. This is from the concussion community. It's a great website if you have a concussion. And what they have is people on the outside can look fine, but on the inside feel terrible. So the person on the inside, how am I? Awful. Do I care about things? Not really. Do I have any energy? No. You know, am I balanced? No, I feel like I'm going to fall over. But on the outside, they look good. So the inside doesn't always represent the outside, nor does the outside always represent the inside. Neither Temple Grandin nor Stephen Hawking appeared to be neurotypical, but both of them were brilliant. Temple Grandin is brilliant and has written multiple books, and Stephen Hawking's is one of the smartest people, they say, ever. And it's again, just because the outside is one way, there's a lot going on visually on the inside. So when you have an eye, you have your eyesight that's 20/20, and people know about that quite well. The back of the eye, the lining, is called the retina, and the retina is an actual part of the brain. There's a book called The Retina.
Here's what I found.
An approachable part of the brain. So now you also have your peripheral eyesight, like we talked about. So you have central eyesight and peripheral eyesight. That's your eyesight. And if you look at insurance codes, and when we have patients, we have to abide by the insurance codes. There's nearsighted, farsighted for the central eyesight and astigmatism. Then you have lazy eye, would mean you're missing central eyesight in one eye. But you also have peripheral eyesight. And after a stroke, a lot of people have field cuts where they're missing some eyesight. That's peripheral eyesight. Those are what was known to be connected to the eye. But many years ago, people started realizing if you angle the light from the side, then your eyes will reflexively bend toward the light, the point. So the light comes in from the side, your eyes reflexively head toward the light, and then your neck turns. If the light comes from above, your eyes go up and your head goes up. If the light comes from below, your head will come down. So the neck position was controlled by how the light was coming in your eyes. And in addition, if the light was coming in from way above and you're up here, as your chin goes up, you eventually lean backwards and you put more weight on your lower back. If the magnification in one side of your glasses is different than the other side, then you're twisting things because one side will appear to be farther away than the other side. And that will rotate your shoulders and rotate your hips. So there's a whole bunch of signals from the eyes that link with postural stability in your neck, your hips, your ankles. There's also visual attention and motion awareness and speed. So there's a lot of different pathways that were discovered that don't yet have too many diagnosis codes, but they exist. Now, there's new pathways that were discovered about 20 years ago, but they discovered them in mice. And then they had to work their way up to rabbits and ferrets and eventually monkeys. And now it's known, but just in the last several years, that humans have all these retinal connections that are linked with your affect, memory, emotional regulation, glucose regulation. There's a link between perceived danger in your amygdala and your appetite and your sleep. All of these centers are linked with the retina, and they're really important because if there's any problems in those signals, that's your how am I. And if you're not feeling well, then your executive functions, your memory and your thinking and your decision making is way worse. So that's kind of a quick overview on visual processing. You have a bunch of pathways for your how am I and who am I with your memories. You have another bunch of pathways for your posture, the where am I, and another bunch of pathways for where the object is, what it is, how fast it's moving, all of those types of things. And all together is visual processing. And then you also should have another balloon drawn for internal visualization, like we talked about. So now we'll get into the effects. So now that you know what visual processing is, and it's all encompassing, how does it get affected when you have a stroke? So there's 4 main categories that it affects. One would be sensory systems, where you'd have trouble with sounds, sound sensitivity, lights, any light bothers you, movements. I had a patient today where so she saw something moving horizontally like this, she got very nauseous because her eye couldn't handle it. Smells, some patients can't tolerate certain smells, temperature, pressure. There's a lot of sensory inputs, and people can develop sensitivities to them. In addition, you can have the inability to control your motor skills, and you can have problems with emotional regulation. And then you have a lot of problems with thinking and memory and decision making. Many, many people tell me, I used to multitask, and now I have a stroke and all my attention is on making sure I don't fall over, and I'm nauseous and I don't see on one side. So my midline is shifted over, so I can't think. But that's the main categories of thinking, emotions, motor control, and sensory signals. In order to deal with having a stroke, you have to be flexible and you have to adapt to these new changes. So if you have a field cut after a stroke and you're missing part of your eyesight, then your brain starts ignoring that part and it shifts your attention over to the part that's remaining. But that midline shift makes your body shift, and then you're not as stable with your posture. So it's like a vicious cycle, that your posture is a little bit less stable and your thinking is being used up to try to keep safe and steady. And so the memory is not there. It's very difficult. So my mentor, Albert Sutton, used to quote Thoreau. And one of the things he used to say over and over was, the flexibility of your adaptability is a true measure of your intelligence. And I couldn't figure out what he meant until finally, many years later, it was, change requires adaptability. And the more flexible you are in order to adapt quickly and then readapt and then readapt again, the smarter you are. And strokes require you to adapt. You have to adapt to not being able to move an arm. We had a patient today who had a stroke on the left half of their brain, so they're right in a motor section, so their right arm doesn't work, but they were right-handed. They have to learn everything all over with their left hand. You have people who can't balance anymore. You have to adapt. But some people don't like to adapt. And so there's some things that require changing, but if people don't like to adapt to it, then whatever's changing isn't caught on by the population. So for instance, in my case, changing your thinking from sharpening your eyesight as sharp as possible so that people can see a mosquito across a room. That's what people think eyeglasses are supposed to do. They're supposed to sharpen eyesight. But eyeglasses can be used also to make you comfortable, to make you perceive the space around you easily, to make you be able to shift your eyes and point them from a teacher to a board to a paper, up and back. Or if you're trying to drive, you need to be able to see the car in front of you, the stoplight in front of you, the side. You have to shift your gaze different places, and you have to be able to adapt to lighting changes. If you're driving through a tunnel, it gets darker. You come out of the tunnel, it's lighter. So sharpening your eyesight so that you see something 1/4 of an inch tall at 20 feet away isn't this type of eyesight we use every day. And although the average population adapts just fine, the people who have a stroke don't necessarily, and they need more testing. So the changes that we're talking about, for instance, is like stores. There used to be where you'd physically go in. Then they started having catalogs sent in the mail, and you would call up and order something. And now there's online shopping. Typewriters. Most of people of my age can remember typewriters that then turned into word processors that then turned into computers. And then now there's hands-free computers where you can just talk and the computer writes everything. Record players were turned into cassettes, and before record players were hi-fis, and you had CDs, then iPods, then streaming music. And for phones, there were landline phones, wireless phones, mobile phones, smartphones. Now, some of the smartphones are smarter than the people using them. It's hard to learn all the different techniques with them. There's eye examinations, start out with eyesight, eye movement, and eye health. And what we're trying to do at Mind Eye Institute is add to it for people who have brain injuries or strokes or autism or learning problems, because the eyesight or eye movement is not enough. You need a lot of visual processing testing. So here's an example from 1838 when lenses came about, 1862 when the eye chart was designed, to 1904 when the instrument that goes in front of your eyes was designed. And to just get a sense of other things. In the 1860s, a lot of different inventions happened, but many of them have become obsolete by now, such as Morse code. But genetics and Mendel's plants, that started about the same time as the eye chart, but they had the Human Genome Project, which completed in 1990. It started many years before. Then they started taking a Google Earth viewpoint of the brain to zoom in and zoom out. That's called the Human Connectome Project, and connectomics is what that is. And then now there's an oculome and oculomics, using the eye to predict what's going on in the body. They're finding the eye has so many biomarkers, and it can be used to predict things happening. So the world keeps continuing to change, but the eye exam still uses the 20/20 design 160 years ago. And the bulk of the population don't have any problems with that because it's a great thing. But after a stroke patients have to have visual processing tested too, not just can you see. So how do we fit in with a team of practitioners? The team is going to include the things we mentioned before, the sensory groups, the motor groups, the thinking groups. We have different practitioners. There actually is also an emotional group too. So you'd have psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers working to help, and counselors, addiction counselors. But there's also a group of motor practitioners that work, physical therapists, occupational therapists, chiropractors, all different kinds, sensory systems. You have audiologists, for instance. Then you have thinking. Donnelly Marcus, in her Designs for Strong Minds, is working with cognitive restructuring. And she was written up with me in the Ghost in My Brain book for all the puzzles that she's worked with. And there's just so many aspects that you need to develop after a stroke. There's a lot of aspects too from an energy perspective in the how am I level, where you have acupuncturists that are necessary to make sure that energy is flowing through your body. There's massage therapists that make sure that the lymph is flowing through your body because the lymph takes away toxins. And the really interesting thing is that as we partner with different practitioners, each of the practitioners is coming back saying, wow, when we put different glasses on patients, the lymph flow is different, their energy is different, their balance is different. So when we're improving the relationship between attention and awareness, we're affecting how they walk, how they balance. And when the processing of the environment is easier, it's requiring less energy and the people are more comfortable. When they're more comfortable, they don't have stress chemicals produced. And when they don't have stress chemicals produced, the peripheral eyesight opens up and and they get a bigger picture of the world. So you have less anxiety because they're not shocked. If you're in a tunnel vision state, you get shocked by things moving and you get startled. So the inputs that we can work with is 8 different channels. The eyes and the ears. The eyes have body language they have to look at with your peripheral eyesight and facial expressions that you'd see with your central eyesight. The ears have tone of voice with your peripheral hearing and content of word choices with your central hearing. So you have 2 of each eyes and ears, and then there's a right and a left. So you have 8 different inputs that have to all be organized together in order to function calmly. And when we use different eyeglasses, it affects all those 8 skills. So again, as a recap, here's visual processing. You have the retinal processing, the stuff that happens at the retina before the optic nerve gets any signals. Then you have an unconscious bunch of processing, a subconscious bunch, and a conscious bunch. So conscious visual processing would include thinking, decision-making, and there's internal attention or on your thoughts or external attention on a target. And that's why when we're looking at the targets to do an eye exam, at the conscious level, trying to identify a target letter, but you have to look at the whole aspect of visual processing because some of this is missing after a stroke. So there's also the Chicago Center, Cerebellar Dizziness, has this beautiful slide, and it talks about reflexes, and you need them for motor control. So you have a link between eye position and where the target is. If my target's below me, my eyes are downwards. If target's above, my eyes are up to the right. So you have your eye versus the target. Then you have your eye position being stable versus the head. Then you have your head position with respect to the body with respect to gravity. And then your head movement can be active or passive when you're rotating your head. And there's different reflexes that govern all of those. So if any of these are disrupted during a stroke, those are at the unconscious level. They have to be rehearsed. We can, from our end, we can use eyeglasses to help change that. And in addition to changing the different posture components, the neck and the hips, and rebuilding those reflexes, you can build up the internal visual skills of visualization, visual imagery, isolating your eye movements, matching the sensory integration with matching eyes and ears together, and also knowing where you are, orienting yourself with respect to gravity, and then planning, navigating where you're going, where an object is. So that if you're trying to walk in your house and get from your chair to the kitchen, that you can navigate along the way and not bump into a wall or a doorway. Because if you're missing, if you have a field cut and you're missing some of their eyesight, then people tend to get bruised and bump into things. So I wanted to leave time for questions. So I wanted to have special thanks to our entire Mind-Eye team. This is a coordinated effort. So as you see, Jordan and David are here online to help you. Adam has put together a beautiful set of slides. The staff worked really hard today to make sure the patients could be finished on time so that we could be starting the webinar at 6 o'clock. And it's a nice team. And then my mentor, Albert Sutton, who taught me quite a lot about visual processing, with the caveat of never, ever, ever take things for granted. Always question. When you see a patient that's different, always ask why, and keep building the profession. He spent 70 years of his life building the profession. Hopefully I'll spend 70 years of my life doing that too. So there's such a short time. So some questions are going to get missed. We're going to start taking them right away. But if you have questions that haven't been answered later tonight, feel free to email us at info@mindeye.com, or you can call us at 847-984-3156. And take it away, Jordan, with questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Zielinski. I'm going to normally we'd, kind of go over some things, but I think we're running tight on time. I want to make sure that we get as many questions in as possible from people that have submitted things. So first off here, we're going to go with from Beth. How do the eyes relate to balance and walking after a cerebellar hemorrhagic stroke?
Okay, Beth, is Beth online now? Because it depends on a cerebellar hemorrhagic stroke, depends on the age of the person. So do you have, a 10-year-old? Do you have a baby who had the cerebellar hemorrhagic stroke at birth? Or do you have, 70-year-old who's already had decades of walking? But
wait, if she's on here yet, give me 1 second. We'll see if she responds to that, that chat here.
But if she's not, then I guess the general answer is balance has many components, one of which is peripheral eyesight, where you are perceiving at a subconscious level, just being aware of the ground beneath you. The balance in the peripheral eyesight, it's also linked with the sensors on the bottom of your feet, as well as your head position. So the cerebellar stroke will knock out some of your cerebellum. And one of the things that the cerebellum does is it smooths out motor movements and it smooths out thinking. So if you have a cerebellar stroke, you're going to have problems with thinking. You're going to have problems with walking, and you'd walk more like a robot because you can't have smooth walking. That's what they say with robots, that because of your cerebellum, ballet dancers can have these smooth movements, whereas a robot can go up, down, up here, very jerky. So a cerebellar hemorrhage would be the same type of thing. How the eyes relate to it would be the peripheral eyesight is not going to be functioning accurately. So you're going to have a mismatch between what you're aware of beneath you and where your head position is, because the cerebellum's linked with sensors that tell you where your head is. They're called vestibular nuclei. Meanwhile, the judgment of space, of how far away from you things are, is often affected. So it's not really the eyes directly that's related to balance. It's the brain's interpretation of the signals from the eyes. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Now that sounds like too that would relate to, dizziness as well. Am I correct?
Yes, it would. Because if your eyes are moving around and the world is moving around, that can make you dizzy. If your eyes think straight ahead is one way, but your head feels tilted, that there's a mismatch, that'll make you dizzy. So dizziness would come from a sensory mismatch in that case.
Okay. Yeah, and we have another one here. Beth, I hope that answered your question. Jackie has one. Her husband suffered a stroke this past March, which caused vision issues for him. He does have left field vision cuts on his left and right eyes. His left eye cut is the most uncomfortable / noticeable for him. Would, brain glasses and our program help to alleviate this discomfort for him, or help him to kind of look past or create new vision pathways?
So I'm assuming that her husband is older too. Are they if your husband suffered a stroke, but like the left field cuts on both left and right eyes would say that he had a right brain damage, and the brain glasses will not be able to make the field cut go away. But what it would do is be able to shift his center of gravity so that he wasn't missing the left side so much. There are ways you can look with your eyes to scan your left side. There are ways you can picture in your mind what's going on with your left side. And what I'd want to know from her is, was it a neglect or just a stroke? Because sometimes you can just be missing eyesight, and other times your brain is neglecting this side. So it's a unilateral neglect or not. And and they're different as far as how you treat them. So the answer to your question is, would the glasses help alleviate the discomfort? The glasses could provide him experiences so that he would not be so aware of what's going on his left side. I see right here that he's 55 when he had the stroke, and now he's 56. So it would be likely, you can't promise based on just that, because is it just the field cuts, or is it that he also has trouble with motor skills? How's his emotional regulation? All of those other types of things. Sometimes you need a whole team, but the answer in general is yes, that type of a patient, we can help them ignore the fields that they've missed. And you can create other abilities like internal visualization to kind of replace what they've lost, but you can't fix the damaged area. It's like being a typist and all of a sudden losing 3 fingers, and you need them, but you can learn to type with the remaining 7 fingers and eventually be just as good. Just a different way.
Wonderful. Wonderful. All right. And so Donna has a question. Do your patients have brain fog prior to contacting MindEye? So basically, what effect does MindEye have on aspects of brain fog? Is that something that we see with stroke patients or TBI patients?
Well, it depends on the person. There's survival functions like keeping you alive. And then there's executive functions, which would be thinking and memory and planning and organizing. The executive functions, when they don't work, they call it brain fog. So if you're in survival mode, which would be like your fight or flight nervous system is on overload all the time and you're anxious and you startle easily, if that's turned on, then people do have brain fog, because when the survival mode is on, the executive function is off or lessened. Do the patients have brain fog prior to contacting MindEye? No, we see a lot of patients without brain fog who just want to get back to their old jobs and learn a new way of doing things and get on with their life. As far as what types of strokes we see, there's all different types. You have ischemic and hemorrhagic. And then, as I said earlier, some of them affect emotional centers, some affect sensory centers, some affect motor centers, some affect the eyesight itself, which would be a sensory center, and some affect your thinking. But a lot of times the thinking can come back. If the thinking is not working because the brain's in survival mode, then we can bring the thinking back. And that's the type of thing that Donnelly Marcus does very well. But what we provide is the environment. We're not working directly on the brain fog. We're working on lessening the stress from the outside environment. So we're taking away visual stress and how the visual and auditory mapping of is linked together. So if we lessen your overall stress, it takes away some of the brain fog because you don't have the stress chemicals.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, Amy has a question in regards to looks like multiple sclerosis. She's asking for French, if someone is losing peripheral eyesight with each MS flare that they have, are you able to possibly help them in any way?
So what you're asking is if they're in a state of flux, losing and losing and losing because their optic nerve is getting swollen. Can we help them? The answer is yes. We can't help the eyesight that they're losing, but we can help them take the remaining eyesight and learn how to use it really, really well.
Wonderful, wonderful. So definitely can help with that. That's good. Okay, it looks like Kim has a question about the Safe and Sound protocol, which is an auditory intervention, listening to filtered music that stimulates the looks like ventral vagal nerve based on polyvagal theory. Is that anything that you're aware of or you've talked about?
Well, I haven't talked about it. I mean, that's from Steve Porges's work on the polyvagal theory. He used to be based in Chicago. There's many different auditory treatment programs, and they do work. I mean, your vagus nerve is a giant nerve that, you know, calms your body. It's linked with parasympathetic activity. And Porges's work, they always talk about a fight or flight. Then they now talk about fight or flight or freeze. And then they actually have, you know, sexual arousal also is part of the fight or flight system. And then you have the rest and digest, which is the parasympathetic, the opposite. But Steve Porges's work said, well, the vagal theory, the polyvagal theory says this, the vagus nerve is not just, you know, rest and digest. You also have a friend and befriend. I think they call it tend and befriend. Tend to yourself and befriend, and it's more of a internal thing. As far as I've heard, I don't know much about the Safe and Sound protocol, but I do know that it's gotten good reviews, that, you know, people like it. There's, you know, different products for it, but the way I've thought about it is that if you're not ready for the outside intervention to be changed, or if your eyes and ears are mismatched with each other, like some of these auditory testing, when you put them on the headphones on to listen to the sounds that are filtered, your eyes move too. And sometimes, like the Tomatis method, the Berard method, it's general AIT, auditory integration training, the listening program. If you watch a child's eyes while they have these headphones on, sometimes their eyes are all over the place, and then eventually they link back and forth and back and forth. So if you're not ready for an auditory program, it would have to be in the proper sequence. So perhaps because I'm an optometrist, I'm more biased, or perhaps because your brain will prioritize your eyes over your ears. If you see something and you hear something different, your brain's going to believe your eyes, not your ears. And that's proven with the McGurk theory, the McGurk phenomenon. You hear somebody saying the sound ga, ba, I'm sorry, you hear a person saying the sound ba, you see them with an open mouth, your brain undoes what you hear and it overrides it. So to me, before I would do the Safe and Sound auditory thing, I would make sure that the visual pathways were balanced and the auditory visual systems were linked. And then the Safe and Sound theory would be a great thing to do. Sorry, that's a long answer to a short question.
Good, but so that would mean, I mean, in your opinion, it would be beneficial for them to come to us first and link that visual and auditory processing component.
It would, because activating the vagus nerve absolutely helps calm everything down. And when you're calming things down, your peripheral retina opens up and you're aware of much more, which makes your walking more stable and your thinking more. So yes, it's helpful. But I think that your brain will prioritize your eyes over your ears. So if you start with your ears, it's not going to be as successful or long lasting if there's still a problem with the eyes.
Wonderful. We have a question from a person here in Brazil. Her son has, now I might mispronounce this, but periventricular leukomalacia.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's the white matter. You have the ventricles are in the brain and there's white matter kind of around them. So when the white matter is softened, that's usually in preemies when you have a baby that's not fully cooked. Sometimes the white matter is not developed all the way. But what are you asking about the PVL?
Yeah, so he's consequently has some processing disorders and also has moderately low vision. I think that what they're wanting to know is kind of the extent that we could help in that.
Yeah, in that respect, we do a lot of that. We have a lot of PVL babies because we get the, I'm on the medical advisory board for the HIE, hopeforhie.com or .org, hopeforhie.org for the babies who are born early and they have hypoxic events. So it's hypoxic ischemic encephalitis or encephalopathy, and periventricular leukomalacia is not quite that, but it's still, because the signals aren't getting into your spinal cord the proper way, they're not going through from one part of the brain to the other part of the brain right away, you're going to have problems. What we can do is try to rebuild pathways. Usually these are tiny children. So your brain is still developing till you're around 25 years old. So there's plenty of time to work on that.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Those are the type we put prisms on that rotate, and the prisms provide different experiences for them. And then they have to learn to adapt, like I said in the talking.
Wonderful. We got another question too here from Maggie, and it's surrounding dizziness as well. When she looks left, right, fast, like driving or always moving, scanning her surroundings, it makes her very dizzy. Again, what all can we help with in that regard?
Depends on what's going on. If you look left and then right, it makes you dizzy. So it might be from your head position, your chin position. So the first thing I would tell her is to experiment in putting her chin up higher, down lower, tilting her head. There might be a position where when she looks right and left, it's not so bad. Does it happen when she's lying down in a bed? Because if it's not happening when she's lying down, but it is happening when she is sitting up, then sometimes it's the actual neck itself. So you can have the cervical instability. You can try putting like a bath towel around your neck, sort of like a neck brace, and see if that takes away that dizziness. So if your question is just, can it be helped? First, you've got to figure out if it's your neck or your eyes. And, you can do that by experimenting laying down or lying down versus sitting up. Changing the lighting. Does it not happen in dim light, but does happen in bright light? So those are the types of things we would look for, but you could do them at home.
We'll experiment to see if it's, beneficial for her before she comes in. That's good.
Yeah, because then if you call it, it's like a car mechanic. You go and you say, fix my car, it makes a noise. The first thing mechanic says is when. Is it when you turn it on, when it's going uphill, when you turn the air conditioner on, when you hit the brake? You got to know when, so you know which pathway to look at. So it's not good enough to just say, I get dizzy. You got to know, is it from your neck? Is there some bone in your neck that's not staying stable? Is there muscles that are pulled? Is she wearing a pair of glasses that's tensing up muscles on one side, that's twisting her neck? That's why I'd want to know if it happens when she's lying down or if she's sitting with her neck held. And I would want to know if the luminance level made a difference.
Okay. So we got another one here from Julie. If you're working with an older gentleman with cerebellar damage, would you focus on peripheral or central vision? I'm assuming it's going to be dependent on kind of what's going on, but could you go into that a little more?
Well, we wouldn't focus on central eyesight because central eyesight is slow. We would focus on peripheral eyesight based on that question because it's faster and it's used before central eyesight. But before I would focus on peripheral eyesight or central eyesight, I would focus on internal systems like where am I? Again, like we said earlier, if you have cerebellar damage, you're going to have a where am I problem. You're not going to be able to orient your body against gravity well. And if your body is not oriented, it would be like being on a rocking boat. You're not going to use peripheral or central eyesight efficiently. So you got to stabilize yourself. You have to fix the balance between the right circuitry and the left circuitry, provide a lot of experiences with differences, like you would a toddler learning how to walk. You provide experiences, walk on sand, walk on grass, walk up a ramp, walk down a ramp, you know, all the different types of things so that walking becomes solid. So for somebody with cerebellar damage, you got to build up a bunch of skills internally. You build up visualization skills, because you can visualize and expand your peripheral eyesight just by thinking. So somebody with cerebellar damage, I would not do peripheral or central eyesight first. I would stabilize them, work a lot on imagery, and eventually work on the peripheral.
Okay. Okay. Good to know. Good to know on that. I have another question here too, surrounding the optic nerve. If can our tools help if there's damage to the optic nerve? The doctor says that the eyes are fine, but all my issues are linked to the optic nerve damage when I suffered a TBI.
Sure. The optic nerve has 1.2 million fibers in it. So even if you damaged 1 million of them, there's still 200,000 left. We can take what's left over and help you use it. We can't make eyesight come back. So if some of your optic nerve is damaged and the eyesight's gone, we cannot fix that. But what we can do is take all those non-image forming fibers, which are connected to the optic nerve, and blast them and help you use them to their full extent. So basically touch on your untapped potential of the leftover optic nerve.
Awesome. Have another one on some vertigo from Tony. She had a brainstem stroke March 2022. She's 54 and she has chronic vertigo, room spinning 24/7. What can we do, to help with that?
Wow, brainstem strokes are not good. If they're chronic vertigo, the first thing I would want to know is what she's done already. Like, has she tried any sort of neck type person to deal with, like, what's there? Does it happen even when she's lying flat? Does like if she changes her head position at all, does it, even if it's there 24/7, does it lessen or get exacerbated? Has she tried any nutrients to help, build new skills? I mean, can brain glasses help? That probably is not a glasses thing, but it may be blocking off sights. We had a patient who had chronic vertigo, not as bad as she's describing, that came in a week ago, and we had just blank glasses, and we took a magic marker and blocked off a little spot in the center, and this lady's tremors went away, her motion sickness went away, her vertigo went away, just because we blocked a spot. So this is sounding more like blocking some spot that's creating the vertigo rather than giving her lenses. So so can brain glasses help? Probably not glasses, but probably yes, figuring out which spot is creating the hassle, the problem, and then just blocking it off.
Okay. Interesting. Right. And then Steve has a question. He's not had a stroke, but since January, when driving over 45 miles per hour, his head starts to feel wavy, and his arms and the top and back of his head feel tingly, like hair standing up. His neuro-optometrist says his eyes aren't teaming together. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, if I'm assuming somebody told you correctly, your eyes are not teaming together, but you got to remember, it's your eyeballs are just sitting there waiting for the brain to give them information. So it's your brain not figuring out how to coordinate two circuits. So the first thing I'd want to know would be, do your glasses match when you have the circuitry coming in? When the light comes in through your right and left eyes, is it coming in equally? Or is one side coming in differently than the other? Since it only happens after 45 miles per hour, that means the side vision, when the eyesight on the side, when there's a moving target, that would link with some of the non-image forming pathways. I'm trying to figure out what I would do with that. My thought, you're asking for my thoughts. My thoughts would be similar to the previous patient, where I would want to know, first, are you balanced right and left? Second, is your auditory and visual space matched, or is there a mismatch? And third, can we block out something on the sides? It's only happening when you go at a certain speed, and it's only happening on the side of your eyes. So what if you blocked off a little bit of spots, different places? Would that help? Hope that answered it.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, I think we're gonna wrap up here now. Thank you everyone so much for all of your questions. Thank you, Dr. Zielinski, for the presentation and going over everything with everyone. You're just a wonderful resource overall. The world's happy to and lucky to have you.
Well, thanks, Jordan. I think we're lucky to have a nice team. It gets better and better every single time we're doing something like this, because the team approach it's like when you treat patients, you need a little of everything.
Yes.
Thanks.
Well, thank you. And if anyone has any other questions or anything, we've pinned the links to the new patient inquiry forms. Feel free to reach out to us anytime. We're always happy to answer any other questions that you have. If you're looking to schedule an appointment, you can find us on the website. We have several links that are here pinned in the comments. Feel free to reach out. You can email info@MindEye. There's, lots of ways to reach out. Best ones are going to be these links that are pinned here at the top of the comments. If we missed your questions, again, we apologize. We will, be happy to answer any of those questions with you further. But otherwise, I want everyone to have a great evening, and thank you so much for staying on with us and watching our presentation.
What MindEye is trying to do is take the newest neuroscience research and put it into optometry so that eye care can be front and center, the first place people go. And then all of the other practitioners will have an easier time. So, yeah. Thanks. Yeah, you're right. Have a nice evening.
Thank you, everyone.